Hey guys, this is Carly, or Curly B, and I'm going to read you guys something that I wrote. Well, I'm starting on a novel. Well, I don't know if it will be a novel yet, but we'll see. So I'm just going to read you the first couple pages and see what you guys think. Okay? I'm not exactly sure what the story's going to be called yet, but we'll see. Once I'm finished with it, which I'm not sure exactly how long it'll be. Okay, I'll stop talking. Chapter 1, Moments. It was a cool, sunny afternoon, as David and I walked slowly down the Fifth Avenue. School was over for the day, and we were heading home, trying to forget the stressful memories of work. We walked in silence, but not a dead, cynical silence, but a warm and friendly silence. We walked under cool shadows casted by the trees. David looked stressed and worried. Final exams were coming up, and he wasn't the best student. I looked up at his strong but kind face and smiled, trying to comfort his uneasiness. He smiled back and held my hand. Most brothers and sisters would think this would be strange and unethical for us to be friends, but for me, it's unique and comforting to know that I have someone looking out for me. We came to our street as we turned into the big tunnel that led to our apartment. We've been living in the city of Chicago for all of our lives, and we love it. David and I are both city people and absolutely love it. We couldn't last one day in the outdoors like most people. The sun's rays were shining through each of the trees, casting light rays and shadows from the luxuriant trees onto the cement ground. We could see our red apartment building standing high, almost touching the clouds. It was a 30-story apartment, and we lived on the 28th floor. We finally came to our doorstep and rang the buzzer. My mom's voice came on, and asking who it was. "It's David and Gina," David answered abruptly. The buzzer rang the buzzer rang to let us in, and David flung the door wide open, and we walked inside the red apartment. David huffed and slammed his green and yellow backpack down onto the hard tile floor, making a firework noise. I jumped to the sound, trying not to let him see my disgusted face. "Mom, we're home!" David yelled. He walked inside his room and slammed the door shut. Mom came into the entryway and asked what was wrong. "He's just mad that exams are coming up and he doesn't know anything. You'll have to excuse him," I answered in a sarcastic tone. My mom looked at me and rolled her eyes while smiling. "He still shouldn't be slamming things," she echoed in the hallway. I smiled at my mother's ethical comment and went inside my room. My room had dark blue walls, green carpeting, and purple bed covers. I had many other miscellaneous items all over my room. I set my green bag on the wood floor and plunked down into my swirly chair. My small gray and white kitten meowed and jumped up into my lap. "Hey there," I whispered as I stroked the cat's back, and she purred with pleasure. "Have you been bored without me?" "I have." I rolled my eyes, thinking of the hard and tiring day I had at school. I set the cat down carefully as she let out a faint meow of despair. I looked at him sympathetically, but continued to get my homework out. I was once again doing more school. It didn't make much sense to me, but that's life. I guess you have to deal with it. After my homework, I wandered aimlessly through the apartment and happened to come into the kitchen. Mom was cooking stir-fry as the fragrance filled the house and into my nose. I sniffed the heavenly smell and sighed to my delight. I looked over my mom's shoulder and reached for a piece of fried chicken. "Hey!" she said, smacking my hand away from the delicious food. "This isn't for us. This is for the neighbors. Their son died in the war, and this is a sorry gift. So hands off." She smiled and continued to cook. My heart suddenly hit a wrong note, and I processed the sweet boy that lived next door, dying in a war. I couldn't believe it. One day he is playing with his gigantic dog in the yard. The next he is dead, and the mom is receiving sorry food. My ears didn't seem to process it correctly at first, but when they did, my heart felt like a rock slammed into it, tossing it to the side. I fled the kitchen and into my room and closed the door. There I sat on my bed and thought about life and death. I never thought of someone I know dying. I sat there sobbing quietly as my cat walked over and sat on my lap and comforted me. He meowed and laid his head on my lap, purring soundly, as I stroked his back, softly crying. There I cried myself to sleep. The alarm suddenly went off and made me jump. I jerked from my beauty sleep and hit the snooze button. I groaned and reached for my glasses. I looked slowly and tiredly at the clock, and it read 6:30 a.m. I sighed and slowly got out of my warm and comfortable bed and got dressed. I walked down the stairs and sat down at the breakfast table. I smelled oatmeal and fresh squeezed orange juice. My senses were delighted at the smell as I smelled raspberry oatmeal. I grabbed a small bowl in the middle of the dark wood cherry table and started to eat silently. My little brother, Alex, who was already in the kitchen, smacking and shoving his food down his throat. I groaned and rolled my eyes, seeing his messy oatmeal-covered mouth, and looked away. He smiled an evil smile, and suddenly wiped his oatmeal-covered hand all over my shirt. I gasped and jumped up from the table. "Hey, what's your problem, pea-brain?" I yelled. I ran to the bathroom and slammed the door. I didn't know what came over me. It was only some oatmeal. I wiped off the oatmeal from my shirt and huffed every time it wouldn't come off. When I was finally done, it looked warped and worn out, so I decided to switch to a different shirt. I felt bad for yelling at my little brother like that. He was only 5 years old. I guess I was still mad about Fred, the neighbor, dying. He wasn't close to me, but I knew him, and that was sad enough. I walked slowly back into the kitchen and smiled faintly at my brother. He was sobbing with tears now, with oatmeal still smeared on his face. I looked sympathetically at him and told him I was sorry for yelling. He forgave me, and I gave him a big kiss. Although he gave me another bigger and wetter kiss than I had given him. But I didn't care. I quickly grabbed my bag and said my goodbyes to my mom, Dad, and my cat. He just meowed as I went out the door. I saw the yellow and black bus driving up the gravel and slowly stopping. I ran as fast as I could with my bag flying everywhere. I finally reached the bus and got on with the doors just about to close. Made it, I thought to myself triumphantly. The bus driver smiled and closed the heavy yellow doors. As I walked down the bus aisle, I looked around for a seat. There seemed to be none, so I sat down in the back. I sighed and put my bag on the seat of the bus. My best friend didn't come on the bus until 3 more stops. I was the one who picked the seats. I got out my review sheet and began to study for our big science test. I was good at science and didn't need to study as much as others did, but I still needed to review. Finally, my best friend came on and joined me in the back. She looked around the bus, confused. Why the heck did you pick the back?" she questioned sarcastically. I smiled and said, "Because, Your Highness, there were no other good seats except for the one by Jack, but there wasn't enough room for the 2 of us." She looked at me stupidly and shoved my shoulder. "What? You mean there was a seat next to Hot Jack and you didn't take it?" I suddenly felt stupid and ignorant and nodded my head. "Girl, come on! I can sacrifice one bus ride to let you sit by him. You're all like totally in love with him." She laughed and teased me every day that I liked him. Jack was a guy in 10th grade, and he had blonde, shaggy hair with brown highlights and dark blue eyes. He had a deep and serious voice. He was funny and all around hot. I couldn't get over him. I have loved him ever since he came here to the school, which was 4th grade. I was in 9th grade, but I didn't think that was a big of a difference. I never had the courage to interact with him because every time I did, I would blabber on like an idiot. I smiled as I stared at him, flipping through his math book. Katie, my best friend, nudged me in the back, pushing me to him. I took the hint and went over to the seat next to him. I sat down and smiled faintly, looking out the window. My blonde hair was flying about as the wind pushed it this way and that. My brown eyes were shimmering in the sunlight as I began to look at Jack. He was looking at me with those beautiful pools of blue water. I smiled, and suddenly my little brother broke the moment. Hey, sissy, can you help me put my lunchbox into my backpack?" he asked me ignorantly. I nodded my head and took his backpack, reaching over Jack. "Sorry, but could you get my brother's bag?" I asked stupidly. "Sure," he said in his deep, serious voice. Shivers went down my spine, and I giggled silently as he handed the backpack. I was a little mad at Alex, but not too mad. He didn't know what was happening, so I didn't think anything of it. I looked at Katie and smiled nervously as I saw her smiling back at me. She waved her hand, gesturing me to talk to him. I turned towards him and asked him to hand the backpack back to my little brother. He took the bag and gave it gently and talked with Alex, telling him how to do it correctly. I sat there listening intently as I realized he was good with kids as well. I couldn't stop smiling at the moment, but it couldn't last, because the bus stopped and entered into the school's gates. Jack got up and picked up his bag. I stood up and tried to get my bag from between the seats, but they seemed to be stuck. I could see Jack looking at my distress, and I suddenly felt hot and feverish. I smiled as I tugged harder and harder at the bag, but the bag wouldn't budge. "Here, let me help you," he said as he began to pick up the bag and shake it free. He handed me the bag and said, "Here, just be careful, not to sit it there next time." He smiled deviously as he walked out of the bus. "I'll know next time," I said sheepishly as he walked into the school's rotating doors. I stopped smiling as soon as he disappeared and thought of myself as a stupid, cowardly girl who couldn't even stand up to a boy. I huffed and entered into the school just as the bell rang. So, that's pretty much my first chapter. I'm going to be working on the second chapter, and hopefully we'll have it done by next week. So, see you guys then, and hopefully you like the first one so I can keep on writing. Thanks for your encouragement. Bye!